So here's a little story about how I wasn't feeling good over the weekend, and so I asked my wife to run to Micro Center to pick up another box of filament for me. Long story over, she picked up a 3D printer kit for me. Yay! This is not the top of the line of anything. This is a $200 1-up V3. They show it on their website as $200 US plus tax. It doesn't look too impressive. I wasn't expecting much, but hey, let's take a look. This thing is covered with instructions to make sure you read all the documentation carefully, which I did. Yay. So, open the box. It comes with power cords. All right, here's the deal. If you want to see all this stuff, I'm not going to explain everything that's here. You can take a look at the pictures. YouTube power users, you can use J to step backwards and K to pause, but I hate videos that just mind-numbingly go through all of the bags and explain every little piece. Kitty hates it too. She's on my side, so I'm not going to do that. If you want to see everything a little bit longer, you can back up and look at it. But it comes with all the pieces here, threaded rod and linear bearings, which weren't too bad. Things like belts. You know, I'm just listing all the parts that came in the box. In case you're curious, it's nothing too exciting really. It did come with a few zip ties and some Allen wrenches, which were needed. Also wiring for the stepper motors. You know, it did come with all the parts. And here's where I actually got excited, because this came with a actual, well, okay, it's not real. It's a E3D V6 clone hot end, which I wasn't expecting. So I started to get a little excited. Say, oh, hey, maybe this is actually going to be something worthwhile. And it came with, again, I'm sure it's a clone, but an Arduino controller with the Ramps 1.4 driver board for the stepper motors. I was getting excited at this point. I was not expecting this level of quality because it didn't show that on the website. And my Ramps Arduino board comes preloaded with software. Kitty looks like she's taken a dump in this box. That might be prophetic based on where I go from here, because the excitement disappeared pretty quickly. So looking at the back of the box, I just kind of wanted to see what everything said here. You can take the time to read this yourself. I'm not going to read it, but the short answer is their lawyers basically said, you might be an idiot and you might not be able to put this together, and we can't be blamed for the quality if you can't. Good job, lawyers. There was actually a guy, I watched a YouTube video of someone who said it took him 16 hours to put this together, and it took him months before he finally got usable prints. I didn't have that problem, but I'm not a quote-unquote robotics expert like he was. So, specifications. The build area is not quite that big. You know, the x-axis is about 70 millimeters, over 100. 50 micron resolution, boy, that seems generous to me. I'll believe it when I see it. Same with the max print speed of 100 millimeters a second. Optimized, quote-unquote, for PLA, and put quotes around also prints as well, because you can't do any of those without a heated bed, which this does not have. So, a little generous there. What's in the box? It does have laser cut frame. This is a medium density fiberboard with a melamine coating. It was cut nicely. Wasn't the best choice, I guess, for using in this application. Professional grade, quote unquote. It did have universal 3D electronics. I mean, the Arduino Ramps combination is pretty universal. Stepper motors, belts. I was expecting a little picture of Wile E. Coyote next to the Acme screw and machined Acme nut. Universal hot end, that would be the clone of the E3D hot end. Cheapest power supply I've ever seen. It does come with filament. It did not come with assembly and instruction manuals. You had to get those online. And all the tools needed for assembly, a bald-faced lie. I'll go into more detail on that later. But anyway, what else do I need? 4 to 6 hours of time until your first print. I had to take this thing apart 3 times because the instructions were so bad. And I'm not bad at following instructions. They were not good instructions. If you saw them, you would agree with me. But it took probably 6 hours. I would say if I'd gone through it straight through and the instructions were good, it would have taken me 6 hours to put this together. It probably took me closer to 8. I did read the instruction manual before I started. I did have patience. I was laughing by the end of this. A clean workspace. The extruder gets hot. Those two ideas are mutually exclusive. I don't know why they're on the same line. And of course you're going to need extra filament. I did print quite a bit with the 15 feet they gave me. So I felt a lot of these things were not truthful. Advertised well, whatever. I already bought it. Can't take it back, so here we go. The website did actually have the files I needed, and it was organized well. So everything I needed was there, all my instructions, my files, everything, so that was impressive. The bill of materials was rife with errors, misspellings, and parts labeled wrong, parts that weren't in the kit. This list of bags here, that was most frustrating for me because the parts that were included, actually every bag had one extra part. I guess that's cheaper to just include one extra part rather than having people count them right and having to ship out a bolt later. But this was really frustrating because when you actually would read the instructions, like right here where it says to use the M3x16s from hardware bag 2, the bag was never the right bag. They never called out the right bag number, so you had to guess at what they wanted based on the hardware size. So things like the instructions would tell you when assembling something, make sure that the pulley is lined up with these idler gears. Well, you try to, you put it together, and the instructions say you're supposed to add the pulley to this stepper motor, but they're actually already attached. They're actually glued on. Even when you take the set screw out, you can't get them off. I guess they used glue because it was too hard to line up the set screw with the flat part of the pulley. So I went to the garage. I literally had to use a gear puller to pull these gears off of the shafts because they were on there so tight. It was unbelievably frustrating. So the gear puller was not included in the box. Thank you very much. Things like a tapped rod. Some of these rods were tapped on the end. Tapped is in the way the Martian movie was a documentary, I guess you can call it tapped. This is, I had to go to the garage and get my tap set and tap these holes out. Again, not included in the box. There's one part where it tells you to use a drop of super glue to attach the belt to the extruder. Also not included in the box. I didn't have any super glue. I didn't actually glue it. I just left it out. It was fine. I haven't had any problems with it. Part of my frustration was this ramps board. These heat sinks on the stepper drivers are not lined up very well at all. And I was dubious of this. I ended up getting my magnifying glass out and looking a little bit closer to make sure nothing was shorted out before I powered it up. Those heat sinks are really close to a lot of different things that could short out. I ended up repositioning them because I was not comfortable with how this was arranged. One of the driver boards, that heat sink was just right up next to the pins. I can't believe that this was tested before I got it. And when you are supposed to attach the Arduino ramps set to this piece of board to hold it all together, they just had you screw it straight down to this plastic coated board, which you could have static generated and short those pins out. So I ended up adding a couple of standoffs to that to allow better circulation of air and to not have my pins shorting against this piece of plastic. I'm a little touchy about those kinds of things. I had to add zip ties to a lot of things, like around the base of this and around the hot end and the extruder. It was going to fall apart. It's just friction that holds the whole thing together. So I ended up using a lot of zip ties. Maybe that's hokey. Well, it should be hokey that I have to do that. Instructions were missing steps and concepts, like my fan for my extruder. It's just bare wires hanging there. The instructions never tell you how you're supposed to connect that. If I hadn't built other 3D printers, I'd have never known. Nothing about cable management. I ended up just adding a lug to one of the screws, so I had something to zip tie the cables to so that they didn't pull on the hot end and bend all the wires. So here it is. I got it together. I followed the instructions all the way through, used all the parts, and this is it. It actually does come together. So let's test it out. And I'm using my Repetier host software to test all my axes. My x-axis does actually move. I'm impressed. My z-axis does move up and down, a little slow, but so far everything is working until I test the y-axis. And the y-axis does that. I'm a little downhearted at this point, thinking, oh great, what is that? But after digging through it a little bit, turned out that one of the pins had come out of the connector, which I didn't notice till I pulled it back out again. And now the y-axis works. Yay! All right, does it print? It prints. I'm honestly shocked because of all the sloppiness in the frame and all the trouble I had putting things together. If I'd followed the instructions by the book, this would not have worked. But I'm excited at this point. Not everybody is sharing their excitement with me. Whatever, Sophie, go back to sleep. But this is just a test cube, and it actually printed. It's not the best I've ever seen. I mean, I've built printers out of junk before, and I've had similar results. I've had some better results, some worse, but it actually did print despite all the failures that I had along the way. And this is one side that looks pretty good. This side's got a little bit of ringing to it. There's some slop somewhere in one of the axes. I forget which side this was. Again, I was just shocked based on all the frustrations I had that this thing actually worked and did print it.